In this video, I will be critiquing the practice of polygyny, that is, one man having multiple wives, in context of the Islamic worldview. Polygyny is allowed in the Quran and was practiced by Muhammad, but the Quran and Islamic tradition strictly prohibit envy, slander, and jealousy. For convenience, I'm simply going to refer to these collectively as strife for the rest of the video. I will argue that polygyny is not compatible with the prohibition against strife, and as such should have been prohibited. This argument will take two forms, the strong form and the weak form. In this video, I'll just cover the strong form of the argument. Premise 1. Polygynous relationships necessarily result in strife. Premise 2. Strife is haram in Islamic law. Conclusion. Polygynous relationships should have been prohibited in the Quran. Let's expand the strong form of the argument. Premise 1. Polygynous relationships necessarily result in strife. To support this premise, I'll refer to many instances in Sahih al-Bukhari which demonstrate a significant amount of strife within Muhammad's marital relationships. When Surah 33:51 was revealed, it gave Muhammad permission to go out of turn and visit the wives he preferred. Aisha's response to this, recorded in Bukhari 4789, is, "I used to say to him, if I could deny you the permission to go to your other wives, I would not allow your favor to be bestowed on any other person." Bukhari 6691 narrates strife between Aisha and Hafsa over Muhammad's extended stays with Zainab. They come up with a plan to make him feel guilty about visiting her for so long, and when they do this, Muhammad says that he won't do it again, but then he gets a surah revealed, Surah 66:1, which allows him to resume his practice of staying with Zainab for an extended period. Sahih Bukhari 52:18 narrated Ibn Abbas that Umar entered upon Hafsa and said, "O my daughter, do not be misled by the manners of her," that is Aisha, "who is proud of her beauty because of the love of Allah's messenger for her." Bukhari 52:25, while the Prophet was in the house of one of his wives, one of the mothers of the believers sent a meal in a dish. The wife at whose house the Prophet was struck the hand of the servant, causing the dish to fall and break. The Prophet gathered the broken pieces of the dish and then started collecting on them the food which had been in the dish and said, "Your mother, my wife, felt jealous." In Bukhari 54:18, Muhammad says the superiority of Aisha to other women is like the superiority of tharid to other kinds of food. In Bukhari 5666, when Aisha had a headache, she said, "By Allah, I think you want me to die, and if this should happen, you would spend the last part of the day sleeping with one of your wives." In Bukhari 24:68, Umar said to Hafsa, "Demand from me whatever you like, and don't be tempted to imitate your neighbor," that is Aisha, "in her behavior towards the Prophet. For Aisha is more beautiful than you, and more beloved to Allah's messenger." In Bukhari 25:93, Sauda gave up her turn day and night to Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, in order to seek the pleasures of Allah's messenger. Tafsir Ibn Kathir notes of an aging Sauda that she feared that the messenger of Allah might divorce her. And she said, "O messenger of Allah, do not divorce me, give my day to Aisha." And he did, and later on Allah sent down Surah 4:128, which allows a woman to give up her marital rights to save the marriage. Muhammad's wives were divided by status. In Bukhari 25:81, the wives of Allah's messenger were in two groups. One group consisted of Aisha, Hafsa, Safiya, and Sauda, and the other group consisted of Salama and the other wives of Allah's messenger. Notice that several wives in the second group aren't even mentioned by name in this hadith. The Muslims knew that Allah's messenger loved Aisha, so if any of them had a gift and wished to give to Allah's messenger, he would delay it until Allah's messenger had come to Aisha's home. Later in this hadith, Salama requests, then the group of Salama called Fatima, the daughter of Allah's messenger, and sent her to Allah's messenger to say to him, "Your wives request to treat them and the daughter of Abu Bakr on equal terms." Strife even extends to others outside the marital relationships. Bukhari 4750, referring to the slander spread about Aisha, says toward the end of this lengthy hadith, "Of all the wives of Allah's messenger, it was Zainab who aspired to receive from him the same favor as Aisha used to receive. Yet Allah saved her from telling lies because of her piety, but her sister, Hamna, kept on fighting on her behalf, so she was destroyed, as were those who invented and spread the slander." Having demonstrated that there was much strife in Muhammad's relationships, I will now provide support for the key term in premise 1, which is necessarily. That is, polygynous relationships necessarily result in strife. Surah 49:1 says, O you who have believed, do not put before Allah and His Messenger, but fear Allah. Surah 33:21 says, There has certainly been for you in the Messenger of Allah an excellent pattern for anyone whose hope is in Allah and the last day, and who remembers Allah often. Sahih al-Bukhari 26:51, Muhammad said, The best people are those living in my generation, then those coming after them. Muhammad was so preeminent among his companions that they put his words equivalent to Allah's. Bukhari 21:78 records a dispute between Abu Sa'id al-Khudri and Ibn Abbas. Abu Sa'id says, I asked Ibn Abbas whether he had heard it from the Prophet or seen it in the Holy Book. In Bukhari 23:39, Rafi bin Khadij narrates, Whatever Allah's messenger said was right. Among the greatest generation of Muslims, Muhammad was superior. The companions readily acknowledged this. No person was to be put before Muhammad, and he was an excellent pattern of conduct. Since Muhammad's marriages promoted jealousy, envy, and slander, to think that Muslims in subsequent generations could do any better is implicitly, if not explicitly, heretical. This would mean that there is another Muslim who is a more excellent example than Muhammad, or that a man's wives were a more excellent example than Muhammad's wives, or both. This would require Muslims, in the context of marriage, to look to the superior example of this Muslim who can maintain a polygynous marriage without strife, instead of Muhammad. So I conclude that since strife was present in the marriages of Muhammad, it is inherent in all polygynous relationships of lesser Muslims. Premise 2. Strife is haram in Islamic law. This is commonly known. I'll list a few examples. Envy is so dangerous that Allah revealed an invocation against it in Surah 113:1 and 5. I seek refuge in the Lord from the evil of an envier when he envies. Surah 49:12, O you who have believed, avoid much negative assumption. Indeed, some assumption is sin, and do not spy or backbite each other. Bukhari 60:64, the Prophet said, Beware of suspicion, for suspicion is the worst of false tales, and do not look for others' faults, and do not spy. Do not be jealous of one another, and do not desert one another, and do not hate one another. In Sunan Abi Dawud 49:03, Muhammad said, Beware of jealousy, for verily it destroys good deeds the way fire destroys wood. The strong form of the argument to review then is premise 1, polygynous relationships necessarily result in strife. Premise 2, strife is haram in Islamic law. Therefore, the conclusion follows, polygynous relationships should have been prohibited in the Quran.